response to that absurdity, the legislature passed another reform bill by a vote in the Assembly of 136 to 1 and in the Senate of 61 to 1. That bill had the support of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, the Legal Aid Society, the NYCLU. Last year's bill had the support of the New York Times editorial board. D. Vance, you were the main opponent, and your office brings gravity knife prosecutions more aggressively than any office in New York City. You treat gravity knife possession as a felony 4 times more often than all other prosecutors in New York City combined. You treat gravity knife possession as a felony 10 times more often than D.A. Clark. This is what your office considers a gravity knife. Okay? This is a Husky knife. It was Elliot Perilla's knife. He bought it at Home Depot in the Bronx. He used it for work in Manhattan. He was pulled over for a broken taillight because he had a previous criminal conviction and because a police officer was able to force this knife open with the flick of one hand. Your office charged mere possession of this knife as a felony. And you secured a felony conviction, and you secured a prison sentence of 2.5 to 5 years for Elliot Perilla.
This is a very long question you're asking. So let's get to the question.
You've never prosecuted a retailer for possessing these knives. They're sold everywhere, hundreds of stores. And you always respond that knife violence is on the rise. But you've never offered any data to suggest that this knife sold at Ace Hardware, Lowe's, Paragon Sports is any more dangerous than any other type of knife, any other type of object that's sold throughout the city. First question for you.
You only get one.
Will you stop treating these cases as felonies? Second question for you. Since Governor Cuomo characterized the state of enforcement as absurd, allowing the sale of these knives throughout the city and aggressively prosecuting thousands of black and brown men, 86% of those people stopped for gravity knife possession, black and brown young men. What have you done since Governor Cuomo said the state of enforcement is absurd to reduce that absurdity? Those are my 2 questions.
It's hard to answer that question in the way you phrase it. I think our office initially alone was the only prosecutor's office that actually did make enforcement actions against the retailers and filed that enforcement action for them to be severely fined for the sale of gravity knives. So that's one of the first things that we did.
You haven't enforced those agreements. You committed to pledge $900,000 in knife education.
I'm going to ask you to sit down. We're trying to have
But
a not monopolized discussion here.
in any event, going forward, let's just look going forward where we should be looking. Our office should be speaking with the legislative proponents of changes in legislation. We should be drafting a statute that will meet the governor's concerns. The governor, you're quoting the governor accurately, but the governor also vetoed the legislation for the 2nd time this year. And so I think the governor's reasons for doing that were explained by the governor. I'm identified as the proponent, but I don't think I never talked to Governor Cuomo about the bill. So I think there is absolutely an area where we could get to a bill that would both work for the governor and others' points of views, and I hope with those proponents of the bill. We charge felonies when there is a significant prior criminal record. And that's when we charge felonies for possession of these knives. A third of our homicides in New York City are knife related, not all of them gravity knives. But I honestly think that those folks who have these knives for work and use them should not be prosecuted. And those are cases where when individuals come in and are able to demonstrate that, so those cases end up being resolved with, ultimately, largely with dismissals. But I will say that we live in a tight urban compact area, and I think gravity knives, which were declared illegal back some years ago because, like switchblades, they have the capacity to immediately open and be used in assaults. I think that we can change that statute. Let's change it in a way that that meets both your concerns and the concerns of law enforcement, and apparently the concerns of the governor.
You got a question?